Please join me in welcoming Greg and David as they start their presentation.
Thank you, Marion. Thank you all for coming today. David and I are going to walk you through eye to eye, from idea to implementation using disciplined agile delivery. Before we get too far into this, I need to disclose that, as Marion pointed out, we're both DoD civilians, and as such, the points we make in our paper and in today's presentation do not necessarily represent the positions of the United States government, DoD, or its components. So I am Greg Saunders. I'll give you a little background on myself. I did live in Munich for some time, translating German documents as a young military officer. Probably my claim to fame being an Air Force officer, I was the first Air Force budget officer for the Joint Strike Fighter, known now as the F-35 Lightning II, that's built 60 miles away from us in southeast west of here in Fort Worth. After I left the military service of active duty, I did join the reserves, but I went into consulting for about 10 years. And during the consulting, I did IT services, I did financial service, strategic consulting, and had a business practice of about $2.5 million a year. At the same time, I was still working in the reserves and got called back up to help with the Joint Strike Fighter, primarily on cost analysis, negotiating with Norway, Netherlands, those kind of things in the international program. And then ultimately, I came back to the Army Air Force Exchange Service, which we refer to as the Exchange, the big X, and it's a $7 billion company that probably no one here has heard of, or very few. The only people authorized by law to shop there are military members and their dependents and retirees. That's it. So we have a $7 billion company that is not funded by tax dollars. It's all funded by the sales. But it goes back, we pay a dividend of about $150 million a year back to the services to help their quality of life through morale, welfare, and recreation. We give them bowling alleys, camping gear, lakes to fish at, all the stuff. But the real deal that we do, and it's one of the things that makes us different going to work here, we are profit motive, we want to make the dividend to pay back to them. All of our profits go back. But the real deal is, picture yourself, your husband, wife, spouse, or one of your kids is in the service and gets sent overseas. And it's actually in a hostile environment. We have a store there for them. And if they want to go get a sense of home or a taste of home, they can go get their favorite candy bar that you used to give them for Halloween, Christmas, whatever, and get that sense. Now, they're still in a difficult situation, thousands of miles from home, but they can get American goods, products, services, and a taste of home with no tax dollars, with no tax, and at the prices that they would pay in the U.S. That's what we do there. And at the exchange, I've served as the lead of the IT PMO. I've run HR and payroll system for the exchange. Also ran our biggest program for a while. Then I came back to the enterprise project office, served as the project management office lead for the last 2 years, and just changed jobs about a month and a half ago. And I'm running governance. We have, again, we're a $7 billion company, but we have a portfolio of about 95 projects worth about $500 million. And it's from that experience, we're going to pull out a case study, David and I are, that we took from idea to implementation. So David, a couple words from you?
Sure. As Greg mentioned, my name is David Sines. I'm the lead industrial engineer for logistics director at the Exchange. I started off working in e-commerce department and do continuous improvement projects and working a little bit with automation. Now I work for our change management team where I help lead some of our bigger scale automation projects for our distribution centers, as well as establish, evaluate, and monitor the ROI on our projects. This is one of the tools we developed to help do that.
All right, thanks, David. So let's go back to 2020. Let's actually go back to February of 2020. We're all working in our offices. There's something weird going on in the news. People are getting sick. They quarantine a ship off of Japan. This is all going on. And go into June. By that time, we're all working at home. Most of us are. Don't know if the internet's going to work at my own house. Don't know if my company's internet's going to support me. I'd heard about Teams. I'd rather meet face-to-face. I kind of use Zoom on occasion. Was that going to work? Am I going to get fired? Is my company not going to have sales? We don't work off of tax dollars. All this is going on. And our CFO comes in. Of course, this is an online meeting. And he says, we don't get tax money, we're having a problem with sales, we need to conserve cash. And here are some steps we need to take. So now, not only am I concerned about getting sick, my wife's working, as a teacher on the internet, my son's home from school doing college, and our daughter's home from high school doing school in the house herself. And now I'm worried about, oh my goodness, cash crunch, could this be a job killer for me? And at this time, our chief logistics officer, and when I was going over this with my wife, she goes, not everybody probably knows what logistics are. So let me tell you what logistics are. It is the science of moving as efficiently and economically as possible goods, services, people, cattle, whatever, from point A to point B. In the military, for a retailer, and by the way, we have the 8th largest fleet of retail trucks in the world. That's how big we are. But we want to move that as cost efficiently as possible so that we can sell at the lowest price to our military members, some of whom are in this room, or your children, or husbands and wives and spouses. So that's what logistics is. But she said, we're on 4 continents. We have distribution center managers on 3 of those, distribution centers on 3 of those continents. We can save money. My problem is this, and this was she said, here's her problem. We get our financial systems from systems that are 30 to 40 years old, that come in on a monthly basis. They really get published 7 to 10 calendar days later, kind of like most systems work, unless you switch to ERP. And she said, my managers, they really need information on day 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. And if something's trending off or bust threshold, I wanted to be able to affect the end of the month. Can you do that? So she came over to the PMO, and because of the scale this was and the level we were working at and the threat that it was to the company, I normally wouldn't take a project, but I did. And it wasn't full-time anyway, but I served as the senior Scrum Master on that. So that was pretty much the vision. I can save us money, I don't have the tool, get us the tool. Pretty clear. So that's why we were doing it, to conserve cash for the company. Well, what we're going to go over today are 4 things. We're going to show you the tools that our industry, primarily PMI, give us to do disciplined agile delivery. Secondly, we're going to give you an approach that you might be able to adopt or at least look at and say, that might work for my company. Paper gets into more details of it. Then we'll give you a demonstration. The tool itself we have live in the building, and we will walk you through it. I just thought it'd be more interesting, instead of saying, hey, it's this tool and it does X, Y, Z. David's going to give us a 10-minute demo, just like it gives all of our users as part of our change manager, getting people to use it. And then lastly, we'll summarize and give you the results and such. So, the main tools PMI gives us, they're threefold. There are many more, but these are the 3 big ones that we use. First, Scott Amber, Mark Lyons wrote about 5 years ago, edition 1 of WOW. Choose your way of working is really what it is, way of working. And they released edition 2 a couple years ago. It dropped about 200 pages, so it's a much better read at 136. It'll take a couple hours. Concepts will not be new to you. It's just arranging it better. But the real issue is teams that self-organize and choose the way they work have a better chance of succeeding. Pretty simple. It embraces all the Agile principles, all the lean principles, all the PMI principles, primarily focusing on choice is good and context counts. Makes sense? If you know that you can choose and you can read your context, you can choose your best way of working. That's their whole premise. I would still advocate reading it, but that's really the summary of the paper. Moving to the right, PMBOK, by the way, the top 2, if you're a member of PMI, you can download at no cost. The one on the bottom, on the internet, free, no charge whatsoever. Don't bother writing down the web address, just type in DA browser, it comes right up. But let's go to PMBOK 7. It did a drop from PMBOK 6 of about 300 pages. It's still north of 300, but there are some drastic changes in 7. So looking around the room, I'm guessing people probably didn't take their PMBOK or PMP test as of late. What it does is, it just doesn't walk you through the process any longer. There are no longer 10 knowledge areas. There are no longer 5 processes that you have to memorize, and then remember getting ready for the test, you made a little matrix and some were empty and all that stuff. That's not there. Instead, what they did is they came up with 39 different goals, and this gets into the DA browser, and I'm going to point a little bit back here. The point isn't for you to read this, it's just to show you what it is. On the leftmost, you can go in, and this isn't as good as Chat GPT, But you can go in and search and say, I want to do communication. Hey, I want to do team building. Hey, I'm dealing with metrics. And they don't pull it up. And it'll say, oh, that's a primary goal or it's a decision point. So the way you read this, the ovals are goals, and there are 39 of them. So it's not 10 that you have to memorize. The other beauty of this thing is you can be in a room, most of us, as I see in the room, a lot of you have laptops. You can be facilitating a meeting with your laptop and getting guidance. Now what I would really advise is, I'm setting a meeting, I want to get with this topic, I would prep for it and be ready to go. But you could pull it on the fly if somebody brought it up. You don't have to memorize. So first thing, one of 39 goals. Each of the goals breaks into somewhere between 4 and 14 decision points. They go a level below that. These decision points, you see these little groupings, they'll come between 3 and about a dozen options that you can choose for that thing. So somebody has pre-thought this all out for you. You don't have to make it up yourself. You don't have to go on the internet. It's all organized. And better yet, if you see these little black arrows, I know it's small, some cases they say there's a preferred order of doing them, and which is the best will be at the top. Now, here's the real bonus of this thing. We use this as we chose our way of working. It will help your company achieve goals, it will help your team achieve goals, it will also help you look smart. Here's what it does. If you click on one of these options, it brings up considerations and trade-offs. Wouldn't you like somebody advising you if you're trying to make these decisions? It has the pros and cons. So you can facilitate a discussion, ask the questions, and you can figure out your environment and tailor your way of working. That's what these 3 tools do for you. And as we know, Ambler and Lines espouse that fact, and that self-organizing teams are the best way to go. So let's look at one of the tools that WOW gives us, called the Spire diagram, for assessing your environment. So just glance at it. These are visual management tools. Just look at it. Are the red lines big, meaning lots of risk, or are they small, meaning little risk? What do you think? Just looking at it. Small, so you kind of code it like low, at most low, medium risk on the thing. So this is the environment that we had. And I'm going to walk you through the 7 spines. Some of them are self-explanatory, but then I'll tell you our scores and then how that affected our process as we stood up. So at the 12 o'clock, you've got a team size, no explanation needed there. Geographic distribution. In the intro, I went over the fact that, in February, we were all in the same building. 2 months later, in June, when we organized, we were in the same time zone, but I couldn't walk down the hall and see David any longer, and vice versa. And all those ISP issues that we were dealing with. Is it going to be able to support us? We live, people commute as much as 60 miles from my company. Some people live out in, I know they have satellite ISP, and it's not always the most reliable. That was just a concern. Next one down, the 4 o'clock position, organizational distribution. Everything from a startup, where your team can be fed with 2 pizzas, and they don't get paid unless they deliver, and so they're very committed. So very risky, and a coalition partner. So what's the difference between a coalition partner and a paid partner? Anybody want to take a guess? Anybody know? So paid partner, you have a contractual agreement. You can actually take them to court. It's not going to get your project done on time, but they're bound to deliver. A coalition partner, in other words, is another animal, though. This partner may owe you something, but it has no commitment to give it to you. And it's a different relationship you have to manage. So if you're out here, more risk, bigger area of the red. Down to the 5 o'clock position, how can you get your skills? Is it something that's readily available or very hard to get? Down on compliance, you go from informal all the way to existential. One thing that happened to us that was existential to us, we have a private label credit card that we offer only to military members. That's the 2nd lowest interest rate in the world. But it's because of the relationship we have with them. And in 2009, President Obama issued an executive order that said if you, and I don't know if you look at your credit card statements, it says if you issue a credit card statement by 90 days after this executive order, your credit card statement must say to the client or the customer that if you don't pay this off for 1 year, you will pay interest of this amount, and for 2 years this amount. And you may not have noticed the change, but it was a big deal. And if you didn't have it in 90 days, guess what you had to take off the market? Your credit card. So do you think we got that done? We got it done. It didn't matter if we were up late or whatever. That's a, credit cards are very valuable to our customers and to our dividend production. Let's go to the 8 o'clock position, solution complexity. When you see that, think architecture. What all do you have to tie together to make your system work when you get it done? So in our case, you're going to see we're out of legacy. I mentioned some of our systems are 30, 40 years old, and some of the data already comes into data pools that we could readily hit, but some of it that the CLO was saying we needed, we didn't know where we were going to get. So we scaled a little higher on that one. And then domain complexity, think of this as the technical complexity, not of integration, but am I dealing with a 3rd generation language, a 4th generation language, a natural language, all the way up to AI. We were pretty easy. It's 3 and 4 generation language. We had the abilities inside. So this was our environment, not a huge risk, so we had a better chance of succeeding. And from once you know your environment, I want to walk you through our approach. And this is probably an approach that you're very familiar with, but any system that you put in place, I don't care if it's your home, how you take care of your house, how you do your schoolwork, you have to have 3 components. You have to have people. You have to have a process for the people to do. You have to have tools to somewhat make it easier for them. No questions here. Some authors and speakers will say there's a 4th, which is infrastructure, but for the purposes of today in the paper, we just count that as part of the tool. So looking up here, which of these 3 components is most likely to cause you a problem? People. Process, people? Okay, so let me ask the question another way. Which one of these 3 components has a choice? There's only one. People. Choose whether or not to use a process properly, or ignore a step, or take a shortcut. People choose whether to take a hammer out and hit a screw, right? They choose. So where you make your money as a Scrum Master or as a PM is managing those relationships and motivating your team. If you're not doing that, you're not going to deliver. And one of the presenters yesterday talked about the trust factor and all that goes into that and building that. So go back and look at that paper, that presentation. But you have to have that. If you don't have that, I would encourage you to leave the profession. Okay? You have to be able to do that. That's where you make your money. Let me give you a case in point. My sister-in-law Luann and her husband John, in the year 2000, a long, long time ago, were looking for a house. They found the 3 L's, location, location, location. One problem, as is always, it was $75,000 over the budget. They really liked the house. They talked to the real estate agent, well, let me talk to the seller agent, see what happens. She came back the next day, she goes, I have good news, but I also have some bad news. I said, well, what's the good news? They're actually willing to work with you on this 75 grand. What could be the bad news? Well, their neighbor is so despicable that they're willing to walk away from $75,000 to let you have this house. Are you willing to assume that risk? He said, yes. So they had the house, the neighbor moved away about 9 months later, and we go visit and stay with them every Christmas at that very house. It's a lot of fun. But people make you money, or they cost you money. Choose your people wisely. Let's look at our team on our people. So, Chief Logistics Officer and sponsor spelled with a $sign. The reason, that's the President Truman, the buck starts here, he used to have that on his desk. Buck stops here, excuse me. And that person is supposed to get you the resources, not always just money, but all resources that you need to succeed. And that person is the one who is accountable and can get in a lot of trouble if you don't deliver. The PM can get in trouble, and the developers can get in a lot of trouble, but it's really the sponsor who put his or her name on it, is accountable to the company. Move down to the right, the sponsor herself, for the first 14 months of our project, she served as our product owner. That's because it wasn't quite an existential threat to our company, but cash crunch is a big deal. No cash, no cash, no pay bills, no pay salaries, go out of business, right? It's a major threat. So she served as our product owner. So raise the hands, how many had, who've done Agile, have had a C-level person, executive, be your PO for, well, that's expended with time. Okay, so you have. That's a lot of commitment on that person. I mean, coming into a backlog refinement and all that.
You find it quite common in startups.
Okay. Well, that makes sense, yes.
Right. And they have
Yep. Right. Yeah, well, back on the spider diagram, that's that inner circle. Feed the team with 2 pizzas, everybody's committed because you don't pay your mortgage unless you deliver. All right, let's go over to the left. Stakeholders, our sponsor was great. She got us the chief strategy officer to be our advisor on a weekly basis. This chief financial officer came in on a weekly basis. The chief human resources officer came in on a weekly basis on our advisory meetings to make sure that we were aligned with strategy, that we had the finances that we need and we're making the changes that need to happen, and that we had the people resources that we need. She did us very well and set us up for success. You notice that icon up there. If you can't see it well enough, that is a bomb. Has anybody in here had a stakeholder go off like a bomb on your project? If you haven't, you're going to, and it's hard to, it's so fun to deal with. This was a stakeholder that wasn't even on our radar, and it was just so external, we did not see it. David came to our scrum one day and he goes, hey, I gotta let you know, I'm gonna be gone for the next 6 to 8 weeks. Well, David, I know you have operational responsibilities, all the developers do, and it takes priority. And in fact, each of these guys only had about 30 hours a month to devote to this. But he goes, well, there's a strike in Germany. Well, I mean, like the local nationals that we hired to run stuff through the distribution center. He said, oh, no, it's much broader than that. I said, really? He goes, yeah, well, this one union is striking, and for the next couple of months, they're threatening that all unions in solidarity will go on strike, and it's going to shut down all the transportation hubs. What do? We do logistics, right? We receive goods, we sort goods, we repackage goods, we ship goods. What if the ports are closed? What if the train stations are closed? What if you can't go on the freeways to deliver your things? No shipping or receiving of goods. So what David went over to do is to work with the systems internally with that local distribution center manager to see if he could refine the systems inside to maintain or find inventory that is placed to keep our supply chain going. Came back about 10 weeks later, and I'm using this as a sprint, right? You deliver, you deliver, you deliver on whatever cycle. What do you think we didn't do for 10 weeks? No deliveries. The lead developer was gone. So that was a constraint, but because the CLO let us choose how to work, we could still accommodate it. We still did backlog refinement, we still met with the advisors to figure out what was the highest priority when he came back, but that was the environment. Let's go over down to the lower right, our core team. David, you've met. We also had 2 business intelligence people on it. We were very blessed in that sense. One of them used to work for me. So, you know the Tuckman model, form, storm, norm, perform, and adjourn. We were able to go through that a little faster. David already had relationships with both of them. I had it with one of them. We were able to just go through that and not have to have so much argument. It also helped that it was such an intense goal to get through. We had our 3 developers do that. I served as the DASM, and then in December of 21, the CLO brought us the logistics change manager onto our team as an advisor that would meet with us on a regular basis. And the reason she did that was the LCM has a different relationship with the distribution center managers, and we would meet with them to gather requirements, to get feedback on the tool, or go over the training. I'm not a logistician. I did a little bit in the Air Force. David works with their data, but isn't a trained logistician. She would help interpret and say, when they're saying this, really this means this for the user story. Great asset on the team. Very thankful to have her. Moving over to the left, mentioned that we got the headquarters logistics decision makers. Remember, the CLO said they get it in a month. I need it on day 1, 2, 7, etc. Well, that first salvo of requirements came from the decision makers. When we show you the burn-up chart, you'll see when they spiked in giving them. And something interesting, we grow our teams from the field and bring them into the headquarters. There's usually a healthy tension. Most people see that between the headquarters and the field. Should be healthy, sometimes gets unhealthy. But one of the headquarters decision makers said, I used to be a distribution center manager, which is the front line managing 500 people that ship, accept, repack, etc. And he said, this tool I would have loved to have had, but there's one problem. He said, well, what's that? He said, if I were a DCM and something were trending off but hadn't broken the threshold yet, and you called me from the headquarters before I had a chance to fix it, you're kind of wasting my time and I'd be angry. He said, well, how would you like to solve it? So we had a little discussion, and we just made a policy decision with the CLO president, and she said, all right, if we see something that hasn't broken threshold, and David's gonna get into thresholds when you see the tool, we'll give you a couple days to solve it, because we don't wanna break up your normal work, how you're working, your chain of command and everything. So that's our policy, still in effect today. Next thing, these distribution center managers, these are the guys with 300 to 400 people working for them that are front line that make these decisions, and they became our ultimate customer. We didn't know where that was all gonna fall when we started off, but they're the ones who can look at the data on day 1, 7, et cetera, say, well, what can I do in this month to save money by the end of the month, instead of seeing it 6 weeks later and having no effect. It can affect it next month, but why not save it 4 to 6 weeks, which was the CLO's vision. So now we know the team, let's go into our process. You probably use something very similar, 5 steps. Our CLO set that vision, and give me faster than a month, pardon me. The team chose its wow, and then we had our advisors, CSO, CLO, CFO, et cetera. And then the core team did our releases, boom, 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 kept delivering, and then our decision makers used and gave feedback. So we hit the first 3 and the people, so we're gonna focus on the last 2. Again, the paper gets into a lot more detail, but the core release, under WOW, what we did is, we chose our way of working. So disciplined agile delivery, the benefit of that is, it's a toolbox, this wide, this tall, this deep, and it just has almost everything in it. And you saw on the browser that it advises you how to tailor it to your environment, and they give you a tool to figure out how, what your situation is with the spider web. So given that, what we chose was modified Scrum. So on Scrum, they prescribe that you deliver, you release MVP, which is your prototype to see if the market responds and do they like what you're giving. If you do, then you move to MBI, marginal benefit increment, and that's what you release. You keep releasing functionality as the market consumes it. Once there's no market, you turn it off, put those resources on something else. That's what we were doing over here, but our tailoring of this was, instead of going every 2, 4, 6 weeks, 30 hours a month max between him and the BI guys, we just said we would deliver, and it worked for us, we would deliver the first Friday of every month or the subsequent Monday. So if something went really bad at release time, we worked the weekend, not on Monday. It was in effect what we wanted. That's not the goal, but we had to get something out there. So that's what we did. Our first release was January 29th, 2021. We had 17 releases since then. David's going to show you a demo in a while. I told you we missed some months. Off to Germany he went. And in other cases, we weren't able to get it done with our capacity to release something in that month, so we'd skip a month or 2 till we'd gotten something functional that actually worked. All right, so that's our core team and our modified process. Let's go into these decision makers. Does anybody, change management, I'm not talking about managing change and change control boards, I'm talking about people management, people who make or break you. In that, there's a book out by Jeff Haidt, and what he says is, if you just write down these 5 letters, it's ADCAR. And if you get that, you can get what it is. I'm going to give you a short definition, but it says, just remember this, ADCAR. Give somebody awareness, all right? Give them desire. Our desire was pretty easy. Cash constraint, might not be able to pay you. Are you interested in helping? I'm interested in helping. All right. K, knowledge. Give them the skills to do that. A, give them the information to do it. A, give them the ability to do it through training, and then reinforce that training, which is what the R is. So the way the R worked for us, and I'm going to work backwards a little bit here. Our CLO, once we did the first release, when she would meet, and these are all online meetings, say, well, what's the basis of your decision here? What data did you use? I've been to the demos, i.e. you have been at them too. and maybe this part could have helped you make a more informed decision. So she was a great reinforcer that way. Going backwards a little bit on the ability, one of the tools, if you build anything on the web, inherent in that tool is something that measures usage. So we had that, David just found it, and then he could tell us who was using it, how frequently, and what parts they were going to and stuff. So that's how we managed, did we really transfer the ability? And you can also interpret questions when you get questions from users to get that. But that's really our process, 5 steps from vision to implementation. And on the feedback, what we would do, we were very careful with the distribution center managers. So you can see, you know, like getting ready for peak selling season, Thanksgiving, Christmas, you don't want to interfere with them because they're shipping, right? So we wouldn't meet with them then, but we would meet, we'd gather all their information and stuff. But one of them, they were going, at the end, we would always say, what requirements do you have? And let's turn into user stories. One of the DCMs said, I think we should have this requirement. Another DCM said, I don't think we need that. I think it's in the WLI tool. And he said, really? He goes, yeah, just click here, 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 here. And you can hear the guy clicking on the other side. And they're cross country from each other. He goes, hey, I found it. You're right. We don't need that. Now, had the CLO not let us choose how to work, and had we not followed Agile principles of face-to-face meetings are the best way to gather it, that collaboration never would have happened. That's not unique to CAD or PM, but it is unique to being able to choose your way to work. And it was just a byproduct of that. Let's go into our tools. So as we get into these tools, I want to point out that you're going to see Excel, and then anything you go into that you build on the web is going to give you something like this. So we built a little ecosystem that I think you can make if you're building a tool on the web. And I'll get into Excel-based backlog a little bit, but first of all, let's go into the web tool measurement device. And we have, you can see, it gives some metrics that we have 37 tools. In reality, 25 are considered useful. Some of them are static reports. But we climbed into the top 10 and are at number 7 when we printed this back in April. So that was giving us the fact that people were using this. We don't have money, we don't have money coming in, sales telling us, but this told us that we've climbed to number 7. In the right-hand corner, backlog, if you go out to Excel, here's a real advice. If you're dealing with less than 500 user stories, you can manage it in Excel. If you get over that, you've got to get Jira, something like that, which really isn't that expensive, probably for a team of 5, you can get it for $200 a month. But we didn't need that. This was manageable. We came in around 240 user stories, and it's still growing, but it is slowing. And you can manage that. You can go to the internet, type in burn up, burn down chart in Excel, and there are 8 or 9 steps to do it. I'm not going to give you the steps, but visual management is part of Lean, which is part of, there's a tool that Discipline Agile does. There's a burn up chart. So again, if you aren't familiar with burn up and burn down charts, first glance, this is what you look at. Time on the horizontal. When do I have to be done? On the vertical, what do I have to get done? All right? Blue top line shows you when the requirements came in, and this gray line right here tells you if I just straight line deliver at an average per month, that's where I'd be. Orange line tells you how you're doing. So without knowing anything about what the content is, are we ahead or behind schedule? We are behind schedule. You can tell just in a glance. Now the real beauty of visual management, picture yourself at a sporting event or whatever, and you're just really into the game. Do you lean over to your friend and say, hey, what's the score? Well, first it's kind of rude. He's trying, or he or she's trying to watch the game. No, you look at the scoreboard. That's what visual management is, right? So you can work with your sponsors and your executives and share this thing because they're likely to go talk to your developers, right? What happens when they talk to your developer? You lose probably 30 to 40 minutes of coding. But if they look here, they can go address the question to the product owner or the scrum master, and they know what's going on, and you can address it appropriately. So now, these other things that they do is they allow you to do analysis. So you can put, this is hand-drawn on, the black and the green are all hand-drawn on, but you can get an average rate of what we deliver. Historically, we've been delivering 12 per month. We're behind, all right? If we were to go from when we did this analysis with her in April, we would have to deliver at 33 per month. Boy, doesn't that sound like fun. It would wreck my quality of life. David's more than mine. So we went to the CLO and said, ma'am, we have 3 options because we're not going to make this. Something operational could come up again. We can prioritize and cull the list, we can extend the schedule, or we can expand the team which would be hard to bring somebody on at this point and contribute in the next 6 months. It takes 2 months to get them up to speed. So she said, I like prioritizing calls. So we did that. We met with some of the VPs. We met with ourselves first. And we got this line, the blue line. We had 32 to go. And we got it down to 4. And that line brings it right here. And our little green line is a slope of 12. So we've done historically, a slope of 9. We've done historically 12. We're a slope of 9. So we have some extra capacity in case somebody goes on strike or another big operational issue comes up. So these can be used, and we sat down with the CLO, and they're big thinkers and all that stuff, but you got 3 lines to deal with. She didn't have any questions on it. She says, oh, I can see you're not going to make it. Do you have any options? Oh, yes, we do have some options, because we're PMs and we bring you solutions, right? Or options to get there. Okay, well, I actually like your number 1 option. Wow, what do you know? So that's what we did. Now, we're going to get into the demo in a couple minutes, but I want to ask a couple questions. Who in here wears a smartwatch? All right, so I'm going to give you an example that's going to show you that just because well, let's see, what can you measure on a smartwatch? Does my heartbeat, measure my sleep, some of them do oxygen level, and all those other things. They just measure a whole bunch of things. Do you use all of them? I mean, some people really like them, but some don't like them. I'll give you an example of one that doesn't get used. My daughter, who's Marion mentioned that she's over in Luxembourg right now. I didn't sleep the best Sunday night. She was flying by herself. My daughter and our son, well, I've skied for over 45 years, blessed with a wife that likes to ski, doubly blessed because our kids picked it up. So at age 3, we had our kids taking ski lessons. But fast forward 17 years to this March, my daughter's sophomore in college. I'm too cool to ski. I want to snowboard. Okay, I snowboarded when I was young. It's a lot of work, but once it clicks, and your uncle does it too. So 2.5 hours, $200 later, I connect with her at Peak 9 at Breckenridge in Colorado, and she's on the ground. Because the first day you snowboard, if anybody who's learned, you fall 120 or more times. And you have to have the stamina and willpower and desire to get back up. So part of your thing of being there to help is to encourage them, hey, you're doing it. Hey, you made it 25 feet this time. Hey, you made it 30 feet this time. And it's an encouraging thing, but it's not so fun because they keep falling. Second day, we went over to Avon, Colorado at Beaver Creek, and it had snowed 8 inches of powder that night. And while the day went on, it snowed another 4 inches of powder. And my gear's waterproof, but every time I would get off the chairlift, it would all crack because it would freeze because it would get wet on the outside. It's hilarious. But my daughter was going up to a quarter mile on this beautiful powder, had great control, and all of a sudden, down she went. So on skis, you have 2 and you're separate, and you kind of push off and you catch your balance. On a snowboard, you're strapped into this thing on a 45-inch edge. And if you have the misfortune, and a new person does this more often than other people, to catch that edge, front or back, it's a pivot, and your head is the whip. With the end part, and it goes down, and about a half second, she got her hands down, helmet protected, I got up to her, is everything okay? And she goes, yeah, I'm okay. My smartwatch keeps asking if it should call emergency services. And that is insulting. Turned her board, skied down, everything was fine. So there's another author out there, his name is Douglas Hubbard, and he wrote a book of how to measure anything. He talks about a classification chain. I'm going to walk you through the classification chain. All the metrics that David's going to take you through, and he's not going to walk you through the 40 of them, the KPIs, but follow this classification chain. He says, to have a metric, it must be observable or detectable. Can I see it? Can I measure it? Can I count it? All right? The next thing you have to have is, can you put it as a number, classified as a number, quantified in other words. And the third is, can you classify it? And what I mean by classification, that means can you assign it to like a group of people, a nation, a state, a period of time. If you can do those 3 things, you've got valid metrics. So with that, David, could you walk us through the demo of our tool?
Absolutely. So before we get into the Christmas lights that you see on the screen, we'll talk to you a bit about how we got here. So our exchange financial systems are 30 plus years old. We have Excel sheets, we have Hyperion, and if you want to reach information about how your PC DCs operating or you're on the field structures, you have to get an analyst to pull these ad hoc reports out. And it's difficult, time consuming, and you can't get to actionable information quick enough. Or you have to wait till the end of the month when things post. So we figured out that 85% of our financial structure is labor costs. So we focused on that. We brought it to where users can view it on a daily basis. So that way we can see how we performed yesterday, where we're trending on a daily, weekly basis. So that way we can take actions before the month closes, and hopefully course correct so we're not trying to correct things afterwards. So on this first page here, what we're doing is we're merging labor information from our workforce management structures, and then as well as volume information from our DCs from our warehouse labor management structures, and merging these together in Power BI to display something to the end user. And that's what you're seeing here. It's kind of the first landing page the users get. And mainly the column they're looking at is the last column, May, the current column, to see how they are trending. So right now, you can probably barely see it, but you see this slight gray arrow pointing upward saying that their minutes per case delta is 2% more, meaning they're spending approximately 2% more minutes per case when they're processing things out of the DC. So it's great because it's within threshold. I won't give specifics about what our thresholds are at the exchange and stuff like that, but an example of what users are looking at. The next DC down here is at 13%. So productivity went down 13%. Now there's reasons why that's happening. You have system integration going on and things that are updating how things are working, but at a glance, this is updated daily. So they look at this when they open their screens, like this is where we're trending, and they see where they can course correct. But right now, you can't really dig into anything or see like, why am I 13% below, or why am I trending slightly up versus other DCs are going up or down. So we're going to go to the next report. So as we were going through the life cycle of the project and trying to develop things, we found out different ad hoc reports that users wanted to see and developed it through that way. On this one here, we're seeing a bird's eye view of our 3 distribution centers. And again, lots of color, lots of graphs, but mainly we're going to look at the top right-hand side where you see a graph with this line that kind of seems to be trending downward for this year. So we have time on the x-axis, we have cost on the y-axis, and what we're showing here is the trend of our cost per case shipped over time. So since we can see that's kind of trending downward, we're seeing that we're correcting that. If I were to go back to 2022 or 2021, I can see that there are major changes in how that functions. I can see that over time our costs are going up due to some reason. Now for 2023, you can see we're controlling that cost and coming back down. Again, users wanted to be able to dig into further to see why are my costs going up or down, specifically with the one aspect of their workforce that they control is overtime, regular hours, and how time is being used at the DC based on how much volume they're receiving. So we went into a detailed labor report that they could then click into to see what aspects of the distribution center are changing based to their last year's fiscal statements. So on here, we can see is we have currently one distribution center highlighted, and we can see that the biggest change so far has been in this Daniels order selection. So they are basically capturing and processing orders at our distribution center. So 27% reduction. If I click in here, you can see like, all right, our Daniels e-commerce fulfillment is using 51% less labor hours than they were last year. Now this is for the entire fiscal year, but I can also go down to just May and see that for this particular month, we are still using 50% less labor hours. I know the reason why this is happening is because we implemented automation solutions at our distribution center that cut down our labor usage. This is also how we can track that project and see actively how it's impacting our workforce on a daily, weekly basis, also ensure we're achieving the ROI we promised at the beginning of that project. So speaking about e-commerce, we're going to go now to the last example here on this page. So this is more of a day-to-day manager's view of how their specific work area. So we're starting big picture, looking at the distribution center, and how we're hyper-focusing on one area of that distribution center, e-commerce department. And we're going to see now how those costs are trending over time, how the automation is impacting it, and how our overtime is being displayed on things. And again, I won't call it the specific aspects of the tool here, but more so the point of it is that it's giving you visibility on a daily basis rather than at the end of the month going to DCM. It's like, hey, your overtime is 10% more than it was last year. Why was that? This time, they can go see it actively in a very easy to access online tool that anyone with access to it can view, versus having to ask a specific analyst to pull it out or have to pull up a complex report themselves. So by using Power BI to kind of integrate these systems together, give them access to readily available data, they're able to manage their facilities better and therefore reduce their cash expenditure by controlling their costs better. And that completes the demo of this tool, and I'll pass it back to Greg.
All right, David, can you bring the slides back up,
Yes.
please? All right, thank you. So the bottom line on that, you can see some of the trend arrows in there. We're not going to tell you what the thresholds were, but you can see the decision support built in. It's not anywhere near AI, but at least it gives them an indication. I can glance and see where my problem areas are. And then as David walked through, within 4 pages, there's multiple clicks on some of the pages to get your specific area. But on 4 pages, you can get down to the root cause analysis of it. So what we did in our results, by the summer of '22, we did achieve $500,000 in savings. CLO wrote that to the CEO as a milestone she achieved by that summer. And then March of this year, we achieved $1 million in cost savings, which is to the bottom line. We talked about that byproduct of being able to choose your way of working. We had some of that decision maker collaboration of, really, that's available already? And so here's guys that are peers and are running the businesses differently, and one's not doing it as efficiently, and just because we made the connection through our meeting by chance, that got done. So face-to-face, as Agile says, is usually the best way to do it, because you can clarify things. Well, overall, we've given you some examples of your discipline Agile tools and what the environment gives us to use it. Primarily, I would say it's Ambler and Line's way of working. I would say it's the PMBOK, which is available. Both of these are available if you're a PMI member. And then lastly, the DA browser, which is available to anybody. And I use it all the time, even in non-PM related meetings, because there's tips in there that'll help you. We even cited it to look up if we needed any, we could add any new logistics metrics, because there's a metrics section in there. And we didn't refine them, but we assessed them given the trade-off that they gave you. And then you can build on or adapt this approach. The paper gets into more of the detail. It's on UTD's site after the symposium closes. And then you can get results that help your projects, your teams, and your company overall, and add to that bottom line. Our next steps in the company are simply going to be taking this approach and working across the 25 PMs on our team in the Enterprise Project Management Office to make it more agile and to reduce costs and add to our bottom line. And some of these, this was focused on reducing costs out of a cost center, but you can also use the same approach toward delivering something that's a moneymaker for you with your customers. So at this, we will open it up for questions. One thing I will say is, anybody with military association in here? Okay, so if you know somebody, or you have it yourself, or somebody works for you, if you go out to Syracuse University, just type in Syracuse O2O Onward Opportunity, they will pay, there's some donors that do this, and also for your significant other, spouse, husband, wife, they will pay and let you sit the training and pay for one exam for your PMP or the PMI ACP. There might be new ones out there, but if you have members on your team and you're strapped on budget, you could say, hey, are you military? You can go do this. And if you have a husband or wife or a spouse that wants to do this, they're also covered by it. So I try to share that with fellow veterans and military members. But I will open it up to questions at this point. Any questions on the process or Agile or anything like that? Yes?
Hi, I'm Vegas Real Estate. Can we have that?
Sure. Sure.
But I'll take that one here too.
Okay.
So that actually sparked a conversation of a larger group in APIS to just look into how we can apply these tools to other directorates. There's currently an ongoing effort to try to bring the financials into Power BI to get everyone access to data like that too.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great, because Walker's kind of hard to do project management.
Yes.
So,
FA, that's our finance and accounting. They work very closely with doing this, and we've shared everything back to them because they're trying to do this for the whole company.
okay, great.
Others? Well, one we do get, it's kind of fun, if you go back to the spider diagram, to go through and say, hey, let's go through team size, are we going to expand it, are we not? Geographic distribution, what considerations do we have to do on that? All the way through the organizational distribution, but you can get a risk picture of your own project by going through and sitting down with your team on that. That's something we find is valuable to do. The spider diagram doesn't just have to be on your environmental assessment. We've adopted this, and it's a proposal to take to our executive board. But when we take a change request forward for a project, is it a cost thing, a schedule thing, are you changing scope? These are all the different spines. And it comes into, is it NPV, is it IRR, is it a budget change? And what we're proposing to them is, you can look at a glance, and if they're all in the inner circle, my boss, the EPMO director, we're asking you to delegate that authority so she can just make the decision. They have to deal with less information. Wouldn't you want that? Okay, so we're doing that, and then the next circle, we have the circles drawn on that one. The next circle then goes up to the steering committee or the sponsor, if you have a steering committee or a sponsor. The next one goes up to our next committee, which is our evaluation board, and they look at it primarily from a risk perspective. And then the last one we have on the outer ring is our investment committee, and they have the final go or no go. And they're going to be the ones who make the distribution, not the distribution, but the delegation requirements. But this can be adopted to very many things. But you can see, if you're taking in a change request, instead of throwing a bunch of words at them, they look at it and they go, oh, I see, you're here to talk to us about the IRR, because that's the longest one. Yep, you got it, that's why we're here. And, oh, I see that the schedule one is out too. I wonder if the schedule is causing the drop in IRR. And then you've got your framework already set up. You didn't have to tell them, they didn't have to read 50 words. They look at it, it's a framework they can work off of. That's another way to use the spider diagram. And it is, I'm using it, I just took over this other team, which jobs was here. And I'm going to sit down and ask of all of their lines of work, to break it into 2 or 3, I'm going to have each of them do this and share it with our group for team building among ourselves, and to give me a picture of what's going on in their professional world. Okay, well, I'll ask one last time, any other questions? All right, and thank you very much for your attention.